Hey everyone, this is George Couros. Welcome back to another episode of the Innovators Mindset Podcast. And instead of this Thursday doing a viewer question, and even though I still want to do them, you can actually click on the link below. I wanted to share about a presentation I just did at FETC titled "What Makes a Great Leader." And this is based on my book, What Makes a Great Principal, with Allyson Apsey and these 15 amazing contributors, both principals, teachers, students, who talked about the principals, the leaders who had a tremendous impact on them, because we wanted to hear from the people that, the leaders served. And what I talked about in the presentation, and I love going to these conferences sometimes because I will actually say, I'm going to do this presentation and I've never done the presentation before. And then the conference comes along and I'm not ready for it. And then I have to create something, new, something I put together. And even though it was, based on the book, it's not a presentation I've actually done before. So I really challenged myself to really share, practical ideas, share some inspiring messages. And before I get into the content, there is a teacher who came up to me after, and she was in tears. And the reason she was in tears, and it really mattered to me, is that she said, I had really given up on the thought of becoming a principal, about going into school administration. And you had shown me something that I now see in myself. And the way that I actually ended the session was with the idea that be the reason someone has the irrational confidence to go on and do something great. And to know that I did that for a person in that session really mattered to me. But I also wanted to share that because how do we get people in this situation where they don't feel they can go on to do something great? And that's why I wanted to talk about this. And I started off the session really defining what the term leader even meant. And I shared this, that a leader is someone who has the ability to move others forward in a positive direction. And I shared that because I think we can move people, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's always in a positive direction. If you are constantly talking about tearing down things, but you're not talking about building things, you have influence, but you're not a leader, in my opinion. And you can debate that all you want. I guess you're leading people to a bad situation. And I'm not saying we shouldn't actually, tear down some things that don't work, but what are you building instead that's way better? And I gave the example that I often hear people in education say, standardized testing is terrible. We need to get rid of it. And then my response is, for what? What are you going to do instead? I'm not saying we shouldn't get rid of standardized testing, but what are you actually proposing as an alternative? Because people will see education as having no accountability, that you can actually see what the impact of learning is for students because of our teaching. So I've actually advocated to not utilize standardized testing, or, in a minimal way, seeing it as a part, but not the end all be all. But what I've advocated for is using portfolios, actually seeing learning on a much broader sense. And that's why I always talk about the idea of learner-driven, evidence-informed practice, because evidence is a much more holistic term. It can be tests, it can be scores, but it's actually really different way of looking at how we capture learning, whether it's audio, whether it's like a podcast like this, whether it's a blog post, whether it's a piece of art. That's something that I really want to advocate for, is that a leader doesn't just tear things down. They could, but they have to build things up, and not only build things up, but build the people up that we serve. And so that was something really important to me, is that in that room, people saw that they could be a leader no matter their role, but being an administrator does not by default make you a leader, right? You have to move people forward in a positive direction. And so in the session, I talked about 5 pillars, and these are the pillars I shared. The first one is relationship builder, a continuous learner, talent cultivator, resource maximizer, and being visionary. And I'm not going to share all 5. I encourage you to pick up the book, What Makes a Great Principal. I'm very proud of that book, and you can actually see it right here. I don't know where I went, but I did. So if you're listening, I'm pointing at something with my, right? I don't know. There's a horse going to come my way. I don't know. So I share these, and the reason why I think the book is really amazing is not because I just contributed to it. It is because of the people who actually contributed to it. We wanted to ask the people who were served through that process. And in actually really kind of talk about these 5 pillars, one of the things that I talked about in the session, but I didn't talk about in the book, is really how do we get people to continuously move forward, and is really about having an emotional connection to doing something better. That is something that really, really matters. And the example I talked about in the session is, and this is going to totally date me and show you how old I am, is New Coke. I don't know if you remember New Coke, but this, I think it was in the 80s. I can't remember the exact date of when it actually came out. And a lot of people, it was one of the biggest PR debacles. People hated New Coke. There was such an issue with it. And people were wondering, why would Coke take this product that people love, change it, especially if they knew people were going to hate it? But the reality of that situation was they had no clue they're going to hate it. In fact, what they had captured through taste tests, and I think it was like hundreds of thousands, people preferred in the taste test where they actually didn't know what was the New Coke and what was the old Coke. They preferred the taste of the New Coke. And so why did it feel so miserably? Why did people have such an anger about this Coke, this new version of Coke that we're actually that was provided for them? And it wasn't because it didn't taste better. That wasn't it, because overwhelmingly the taste test showed people preferred the New Coke. It was because they liked the feeling of what the old Coke was. They were used to that. So even if you can create something better, it doesn't necessarily mean that people will embrace it. They actually have to feel emotional connection. Why would I give up the thing that I used to do for something that's new? I need to know it actually is better. So that's why I often tell stories in connection to the work, because when you actually can, share insights and ideas, then it actually creates an emotional connection to the content. And so that's one of the things that I talked about. And the one area that I'm actually going to share that I shared from this of the 5 pillars is the idea of talent cultivator. And the reason I talk about talent cultivator is the idea of how do we bring out the best in the people we serve, all of the people we serve. And the terminology that I often use is not students, but I use learners, because learners is encompassing not only of your students, but anyone else willing to grow in your organization, which is hopefully everybody to some extent. There is a little deal that we make when we use that terminology, that we will look to empower all of our learners, but that means you still got to grow. You can't say, look, I've been teaching forever, I don't need to learn this anymore, because now you're not in that vision. You're not in that space. So when we really kind of embrace the idea of learners and that you're willing to grow on your own, how does that actually, improve learning? And I think really it is not only the people that we serve, but ourselves. One of the things I really try to model is my learning, the things that I'm trying to grow with. And even I talk to the group that, hey, this is something new. And if you challenge me on some of the stuff that I'm talking about, because I'm still trying to get better. There is a gentleman who was actually named George, and he was in one of my sessions, and he said, I agreed with you with 85% of the stuff, but about 15% I struggle with. And I said, give me the feedback. I want to hear about it, because I'm still trying to learn. I'm still trying to get better. And he talked about how much he appreciated that humility and vulnerability that I wanted to actually learn. And when you're providing a session and you're saying like, hey, I'm not the expert, I'm a learner, it actually gives you a little grace, but it shows that you're trying to do what you're asking people to do as well. And that's what Talent Cultivator really is about. It's about growth. It's about bringing out the best people in the people you serve, but it means that we all grow, including the administrators, including the leaders. So when I talked about the concept of talent cultivator, I shared this video, and it is really, really powerful. And even though it doesn't necessarily talk about education specifically, it does talk about how sometimes we actually ignore some of our best people, and we spend all of our time on problem areas, people that don't want to move forward. And I just want to get you to play that video. You hear a little beep. There is a swear in it too, but it'll be bleeped out. But it is very powerful, so I'll let you listen to that video right now.
My grandma once, while all her attention went to certain grandkids and not to me or my kids. And she told me I had my head on straight and was one of the strongest young people she knew, and others needed her attention more. My mom once said something similar. She said, I can lay my head down at night and not have to worry about you, and that you have your together. Let's stop doing that, because while I may have my head on straight, I may be strong, I may be independent, I may be a hard worker. That doesn't stop the fact that my head and my heart need love and reassurance too, and I'm human. Your strongest kid needs love. Your strongest grandkids need love. Everybody needs love. So if anyone wonders why I isolate so much and find comfort in being alone, it's because that's where I've taught myself love.
So that video was really powerful for me because it showed me that I was often, actually not spending time on the people that wanted to grow, that wanted to develop. And we often say this, that we spend about 80% of our time on 20% of our people, but we really should spend about 80% of our time on 80% of the people. That is something that is really crucial in how we actually teach, how we learn, because people that want to grow, if you don't pay attention to them, what they will often do is they'll regress or they'll leave. And we don't want either one. And when we actually work, and I should stop for a second here in the sense that sometimes the people that are really trying to embrace new opportunities, they're trying to continuously get better. What happens in school, specifically, they get punished almost. They'll, like, if you know someone is really passionate, eager about education, eager about their job, then we actually sometimes download them with more work, and it's almost like a punishment. I think Todd Whitaker talked about this, so I don't want you to think that's my original idea, but I have heard that from someone else before. And is that something we want to do? Because we're so scared of talking about the people who, push back on everything, and we almost like give them an out, and then we actually punish the people who are doing really great work. And the reason that we focus on making sure that we, spend time with everybody, no matter where they are in their career, where they are in their learning journey, is really to develop people. And what that does is build a culture. If you spend 80% of your time on 80% of your people, what does that actually do? It actually helps them grow and get better, but it also actually creates a culture where maybe the 20% are now absorbed and actually learn from the 80%, or maybe they decide maybe this is not the place for them. And that's okay too, right? Either one is okay, because the focus is really, how do we move our organization forward? And you do that by focusing on people as individuals, at a time. How do I bring out the best? And the reason why the idea of talent cultivator is so important to me is because I'm very focused on how do we actually develop the strengths of all of our learners. And so do we actually look at our students and see what they're really good at, or are we constantly focused on what they can't do? The example I always use is whether response intervention, multi-tiered support systems, have no issue with those ideas. The issue that I often have is we bring teams together and we'll say, hey, you know what, this kid sucks at this. And I want you to think, like, if I'm your boss and that's my approach, you'd hate me. And that's why a lot of kids check out of school, because we're constantly saying, here's what you're not good at. We're going to constantly work on this, as opposed to here's what you're really good at. Here's what I know you're passionate about, and bring out the best. And what happens often is that when you focus on a person's strengths, their weaknesses develop because they build confidence through that process. And so it's not just doing that with staff or with students, but also sharing that focus with staff as well. We often talk about how important it is to be an innovative school, but if we want actually innovative students, you cannot do that through a culture of compliance with your staff. It is really thinking about how do we bring out the best in the people we serve. And the quote that I shared at the end of this section specifically is that the most important research we can do as educators will always be to know the learners we serve. And I go back to how I started this conversation. seeing that teacher really frustrated and then actually, coming up to me and saying how much she appreciated my perspective and that she was going to go again. I want you to think about this, that maybe there's someone in your community that felt the same way as that person. Go seek them out. And maybe they're not, but it's still okay to check out and see how they're doing, because we always want to be that person, is in leadership specifically, that inspires other people to go on and do great things. When I ask people what makes a great principal, and this is one of the premises of the book, the thing that I always hear is that they saw something in me I didn't see in myself, which is the idea of actually giving someone the irrational confidence to go on and do something great, right? And what's irrational to them, in the moment, is what a great leader brings out in them and sees that. So I just wanted to share a little bit from the presentation. I really encourage you to check out the book, What Makes a Great Principal. It doesn't matter where you are, what you are as an administrator, where you're a teacher. Like the book, it has a lot of principle focus, but wherever you are, if you are someone who actually has that influence to make others move forward in a positive direction, I promise you there's something in the book for you. It's a super easy read, but I want to share that from that presentation, just a little reflection. And it challenged me to do it because I wanted to kind of capture some of these ideas, capture some of my thoughts, share with others. And it was funny because after, I wasn't sure how it went, and the feedback was incredible. And it made me want to do better at it the next time. It didn't make me say, oh, okay, it's perfect. It said, you know what? I so appreciate that people are believed in me, shared really positive feedback about it. And now I want to get better at it. And so it was interesting because the group of people that I presented to gave me the rational confidence to keep going, to keep going and trying to get better. So I just wanted to share a little love back to all the people who are in that room. I wanted to share this. I hope you have a wonderful day. Thanks so much for being here. Again, be the reason someone has irrational confidence, do something great. You have no idea the impact you can have, because I know a lot of people, and I told the people at the beginning of the session, I'm not sharing the ideas of what makes a great leader because I ever thought I was one, but because I had one, I know how much it makes a difference. So go and make that difference in the world today. Thanks for being here. Take care.